Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you're deep into your project? You're tweaking inverts and you're just perfecting and fine-tuning your mesh, but somehow your scenes become more and more buggy as time's gone on. From random green faces popping up on your mesh, to sometimes permanent visibility overrides just occurring out of nowhere. And even sometimes you go to open your scene the next day and your mesh is just completely scattered across the screen. In this video, I'll discuss ways how you can implement steps into your workflow that should not only reduce the probability of all of this happening, but more importantly, what you can do when the problem occurs. I know, it's a pain, but trust me, if you're in the habit of saving over the same save file, then this is the best one to break, guaranteed. Best part is as well, you have 3 options that you can take. You can either set up automatic saves through Maya, you can either create manual saves yourself through naming conventions, or have a combination of the two. It's up to you. Maya's autosave feature allows you to create automatic incremental saves from your original save file. Simply go into your settings, preferences, autosave, enable. Slight word of warning. If you do happen to use this route and then you go into an autosave file rather than your original one, the autosave feature will no longer work. To reactivate, simply rename your file with something else. This will let Maya know that you are no longer working from an auto-generated file, and it will now create further autosaves based on the parameters you've set up. Alternatively, you can manually set this up yourself simply by typing v1_r1 standing for version and revision at the end of each of your save files. A version can represent major changes between your save files. For example, perhaps the model was taking a big change since the last time you saved, or perhaps you are in a different part of the process, from say blocking to refining your edge flow, and a revision can count as all the little minor saves in between. These might not appear obvious when you open between different files, but there were little revision changes that were necessary, perhaps as you were going through certain steps and building certain parts of your geometry. At the end of the day, what you call a version and a revision isn't super important, but just by adding this extra step on the end of your save files will keep everything nice and tidy and easy to revert back to. While binary files tend to be smaller in size and are the default option when you first install Maya, binary files are saved in a series of 1s and 0s. So while this is great for storage purposes, it does mean that if something does get corrupted within your file, it's going to be a bit of a struggle to go under the hood to extract any of the bad data. It's enough of an issue where I've often seen posts in forums where people refer to trying to recover a binary file as pretty much a lost cause. Saving MA files over binary files mean you would have the ability to compare a corrupt version against a non-corrupt version of your file. You would do this by taking your corrupt version from what you've incrementally saved and then roll back to a previous version before the corruption was present. This can be done with a text editor application of where you can compare the code between 2 MA scenes to check for any alterations, additions or subtractions of data, and it might be worthwhile to look into the script editor of your corrupted file if you can, just to double check to see if there's any particular errors that might indicate a problem. I'll link a video below of an artist who's going through this exact same issue and demonstrates how to use this particular program and how to recover the corrupt data within his file. The script editor can seem a bit daunting to start with, especially if you're like me and don't consider yourself very code savvy. If you can get into the habit of just looking at the lines of code that's produced every so often by it, this is actually going to help you out quite a bit. You'll start to notice certain phrases that might crop up every so often, and noticing these might help you prevent issues further down the line. It's also really good when you're reaching out to others for help specifically, as it will let other people know what's happening under the hood of your scene rather than just what's going on in the viewport. To bring up the script editor, simply click on the script editor button in the lower right corner to bring up the window. You can scroll through the many lines of text and read everything that's happened in your scene. If you leave this open and start to work on your scene, you'll notice as you start running commands that this will generate new lines of code. Even if you start a new scene while the program is still open, you'll notice it will retain the old information from your previous scene. Something to bear in mind if you're conscious of caches. Simply launch a new instance of Maya and this will flush out your cache. You don't necessarily have to know at this moment in time what any of this stuff means, but if you happen to notice an error or failed occur in the script editor, it might be worth just looking at the window to see what the rest of the surrounding text is, as this will help you grow a greater understanding of how these errors actually happen in the first place. Let's say you aren't able to solve an issue, or perhaps you don't have enough time to investigate it. Depending on which version of Maya you're using, you might have to manually switch this on in your plugin settings found within your settings and preferences. Now, I've had situations where I have attempted to clear my mesh through the normal routine methods, such as deleting your history, freezing your transformation, resetting pivot points and all that jazz, and quite frankly, sometimes it just doesn't work. I've even surprised experienced artists in the past with very unique errors, often leaving quite baffled about how they were there in the first place, let alone even how to fix them. But I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing if someone, say like myself or yourself, is pretty good at finding uncommon problems. Because if anything, it just expands your growth of knowledge. Try and troubleshoot them as best as you can and try and detect the trend as why they keep cropping up if it's repetitive. If you find yourself truly stuck though, don't worry. You can always just export the bits of mesh that you want as an OBJ. Launch a new Maya scene that's blank. And then re-import them back in. OBJs are pretty good at retaining most of the data that you're going to need to keep, and plus this is a really good way to figure out if the reason why your scene's going buggy is because of your actual Maya file, the scene, rather than the geometry. Which, if it's your geometry and not your scene, I would avoid creating a mesh of doom. One thing I have noticed with Maya from time to time is even though it's known to be a little bit buggy, if you work in an unclean way, then this can introduce a variety of issues, and it isn't just limited to the things that you can see in your scene. It can trigger a range of errors that can stack up over time. When I first started to learn Maya, one of my most common errors was actually when I used to delete the history, that would in fact trigger a crash. While it could be a bug in particular that was with that version of Maya, since this was some years ago, I personally put it down to inexperience. Some things to bear in mind when you're modelling. When you're using the extrude tool, just double check to make sure you haven't accidentally used it twice. Me personally, I used to do this quite a bit. If this has happened, just go back in and delete the unnecessary data and everything should be fine. Normally just grabbing the vertices and just merging them together. Chances are they're going to be sitting on top of one another. Toggling between subdivision levels is normally a good way to check if you've come across this issue or not. Toggle between 1 and 3 on your keyboard for your lowest subdivision and a smooth preview, and this should highlight any kind of weird funkiness. Avoid creating n-gons when you can is normally a good golden rule to follow. It's alright if it's at the beginning and perhaps you plan to tidy your mesh up afterwards, but I would normally do this one geometry at a time to avoid forgetting about it. Unfortunately, leaving any in your scene could give a potential to cause progressive bugginess as time goes on. So if you do yourself a good favour and just make sure you keep to either 4-sided faces or 3-sided faces, depending on your workflow, then you should be good. The final tip on this topic would be to keep an eye on your history on the right hand side of the program. If the list is starting to become long enough where it generates a scroll bar, now would be a good time to clear it out. Simply go to Edit, Delete by Type, History while your mesh is selected. And if you'd like to go one step further, you can freeze your transformations on your mesh to zero out the values, so its current world space position is the new default. The cherry on top would be to reset the transformations as well to appear at world origin, which is great for anyone who wants to pick it up afterwards. If you're starting out, this might feel like a lot to take on board straight away, but don't worry, as you progress over time, all this stuff's going to become like second nature one day. And while I say that there's 5 ways, I want to throw in one last tip to help you guys out, and it's definitely helped me a lot from the start and definitely all the way up till now. There'll always come a time when you're not too sure of the answer to a particular problem you're having. If you can, make a note of any error messages that might pop up, perhaps through GUI windows or through lines of code or something in your script, so just anything you can make a note of. This will help you find solutions a lot faster rather than just randomly clicking on settings or perhaps rolling back to a previous version of your scene. It's worth investing some time into some troubleshooting skills, as this will progressively help you grow as an artist. Part of this journey isn't just modelling really cool assets and environments, it's also about problem solving, which in my opinion is just as important as the actual hard skills in the first place. Trust me, you're going to need this if you're going to be working as part of a team, in a studio or remotely, or to be honest, even just for yourself. These are some things that I personally keep in mind in order to stop my work from disappearing into the never so frequently. I hope that there's something that you can take away from this video, or at the very least, perhaps maybe jogged an old tip that someone passed on to you. If you enjoyed what you saw today, then feel free to hit the like button. If you want to learn anything more from me, or perhaps are interested in the growth of this channel, please hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little notification bell. Let me know in the comments down below what tips you guys have for fighting against data corruption. Because let's be honest, who doesn't want to know more ways about how to stop our files just disappearing into thin air? Also, if you happen to be in the world of Facebook, feel free to check out my Facebook group where fellow artists can share their tips, tricks and workflows. It's a really cool place as well if you're looking for constructive feedback or just a second set of eyes onto your work. Everyone's welcome. If you're interested in learning more things from me, please feel free to follow my social media links listed over here. It's a really good place to keep up to date with new content that's coming out, and there might even be some bonus footage in between. And finally, thank you for watching. You guys are awesome, and I'll see you on the next one.